I don't need to tell people in this room about the importance of the work that goes on in econ, given the fact that I think 70%, as someone said to me once, of all financial law across the European Union is made in co-decision making between the European Parliament and the Council of Ministers. And we're living in a very interconnected, intertwined European Union, notwithstanding all of the challenges we face and all of the issues that are thrown up from time to time. But I think ultimately we have all accepted, as a consequence of the financial crash, the importance of working together at some regulatory level, at some level of harmonization, at some level of convergence. And I think that's a lot of the context for this whole debate on FinTech. The very first report that has come from any of the European institutions has come from the European Parliament. I worked with many other colleagues on an own initiative report which we have produced, which is now in place, which I think has given a good framework for the European Commission as part of their dialogue, their consultation, and potentially their action plan to move forward in this area. And I think the Parliament recognises the importance of this entire area. We heard just now about the extraordinary investment that is going on in digital innovation in this space. I think 27, 28 billion was the amount. And you've absolutely been of no doubt that year on year that will double and treble and continue to grow because of the enormous opportunity that exists around this technology. And it's really the fusion of finance and technology and how we work that out. And I think whilst we in Europe we've a lot to celebrate, there are a lot of really interesting things going on, for instance, in London, in Amsterdam, in Frankfurt, in Dublin, in my own constituency in Ireland. The truth is we're probably falling far behind when you compare the kind of innovation that has gone on in Israel, China, the United States. We kind of sometimes pat ourselves in the back and think what a great job we're doing in Europe. The truth is, in the whole innovative space area, we are behind in terms of investment, and we're also behind in terms of big business connectivity. So I think we've a lot to learn from the world, but equally we've a lot to lead on, given what we can do when we come together to do big things. And I think this is one of the big things, this whole area of disruptive technology, especially in the area of financial services. One of the key things that I think was important for me as a parliamentarian on behalf of citizens that we represent directly as we're elected, was to make the point that, in any of this new development, in any of this new space, this transformation piece, it has to be done in the context of financial stability. And that's not to say that there isn't a space for innovation. On the contrary, there is. But given the tsunami we have come through, given the scale of the crash that we have come through in the last 10 years, some countries more acutely than others, a lot of the hard-won gains over the course of the last decade on things like banking union and making sure that we have properly capitalized financial services across the piece, if you like. We can't lose that as we go forward. And actually there's a confidence and there's a trust piece as well. If we're really serious about engaging the full opportunities that go with FinTech, we've got to make sure that financial stability and consumer protection are at the heart of what we want to do. At the end of the day, these are financial products. That's what they are. It's a fusion of digital on one side, financial services on the other. The coming together, if you like, of two disciplines, the necessity to do things differently. And businesses will fail or they will succeed based on their product, being frank. The reason why they exist is because customers like what they do. So we've got to make sure as we provide a space for this, while at the same time that consumer protection and financial stability are at the heart of everything we produce. And some of the priorities that we had in that report, which went through Parliament with a very substantial majority, is on the question of cybersecurity on data issues. And that's a real issue of consumer confidence, consumer protection, making sure that as we ask companies and businesses, big and small, to transact money from one to the next, it's done in an environment which is based on consumer protection. It's important that we get the data protection regulation right, questions around anti-money laundering, questions around confidence and how money is transmitted, That will add to the consumer protection piece as well. And also questions on clear ownership, clear rules of ownership, and how that is transmitted. But I think what was very clear in our report, very clear in the agreement in Parliament, was that we see FinTech as absolutely central to the political priority of Capital Markets Union, an issue that you discussed in the previous session. We see this as absolutely essential if we're going to deliver the new forms of finance, the non-bank lending, if you like, the transformation from banks over a period of time, a cultural change, to non-bank lending, more closely aligned to what's happening in the United States. If we're going to see this, well then FinTech is an absolutely essential component in that. So we very much see, as part of the CMU debate, the whole importance of a digital single market in a circumstance where 20 million small businesses throughout Europe don't accept credit cards and debit cards today. How are we going to have a digital market where still so many micro businesses are not accepting the reality of where the marketplace is today? So we've got to get this right. And I think one of the key recommendations we made in our report, and it's something we can spend a bit of time discussing later, is the importance of a regulatory sandboxing arrangement. Now, we said there are two things from that. One, we think it's important because, we want to regulate, but we don't want to over-regulate. We want to have a level playing pitch for all, but also a circumstance where we will encourage businesses in the innovative area as they grow and foster to take on more and more of the responsibilities of regulation, not done in a kind of one-size-fits-all. So we think having a sandbox is a controlled regulatory environment where that business, working out all of the issues that it has to work out, will work with the regulator in terms of that controlled environment. And secondly, it also provides, I think, huge knowledge to the regulatory system, which is currently not there. Let us be very frank. This, because of the transformation piece, because of the change piece, because of the breadth of change, it is the case that many of our regulatory authorities don't have, quite frankly, within their own capacity, an understanding of what's going on. So I think, from our perspective, it was very important to put this proposal towards a sandboxing, which the British have used quite effectively, actually, whereby the regulatory system works with industry, particularly at that key moment of business development, to see what works and what doesn't work. What are the big benefits in this area? Well, obviously, competition, reducing prices, more choice. You know, if Europe is about anything, it is about competition, it is about innovation, more choice. We are the older part of the world in terms of what we represent. What is it, as Angela Merkel keeps telling us, about 7% of the world's population, 20 to 25% of the world's growth, 50% of all social spending in the world is in Europe. You don't need to be a Yehudi Menuhin to work out the fact that those numbers don't add up. Long-term, Europe needs to get to a better place in terms of its innovative environment and its competitive environment. So it's clear that we see FinTech as part and parcel of Europe's comeback, Europe's ability to reach out. And I think it's important that we never forget, at the end of the day, that what's important is the question of customers, what they want, how their experience end-to-end works, and how it makes a difference for us. And in a circumstance where we're seeing disruption right the way across our industry, we don't know where this is going. But I think what you're finding more and more, particularly in the banking area, is belatedly a need to embrace change, to recognize the challenges that FinTech is throwing up, and to see how that can actually work out. Long term, what do we need in Europe? We need a FinTech ecosystem that works for everyone. A FinTech ecosystem that is at the heart of Europe's comeback and the heart of Europe's development. Probably, if I'm critical of Europe in the past, it is where we see really good ideas. Too often, other parts of the world, because of funding opportunities, venture capital and the like, has a tendency to buy young European businesses and grow it elsewhere. Grow it in a circumstance where there might be more capital opportunities elsewhere. We've got to change that dynamic. We've got to use the funds we have, publicly and privately, to really stand by innovation. And given the fact that, as I said earlier, we are lagging behind other parts of the world, there is a particular responsibility on the Commission in the ultimate proposal that they make to do this in a proportionate and sensible way which meets the concerns of business, the concerns of industry, but also consumer concerns as well. So we were all heartened earlier this year when we saw at the launch of the public consultation on FinTech that I think over 220 odd submissions were received. I think there's big interest in this area. There are a lot of gaps in our education, a lot of gaps in our knowledge in this area, but I think the Commission is taking its time at this, and I think that's the right way to approach. If I can be, usually politicians in the European Parliament are critical of the Commission, but I think in fairness to the Commission, they recognise that they want to do something in a proportionate and steady way rather than in a ham-fisted way, which will actually cause more harm in the long run for our businesses as we try to grow. And I hope in working with industry, working with technology especially, we can really produce a customer experience that's second to none and a customer experience that actually works for Europe's comeback. Thank you very much.